I'm a Baptist pastor, so I'm really used to the fact that we have empty seats down front and all the people sitting in the back. I'm used to that, so that's okay. So don't feel bad about the fact that you're way back there. It's all good. I do want to just take a minute. She briefly shared with you a little bit about us, and I'll just take a few minutes or a moment or two just to share with you kind of where we are, what we do. I'm Jonathan Falwell, pastor at Thomas Road Baptist Church in Lynchburg, Virginia, and I've been a senior pastor there for 10 years. My dad was the pastor. He started the church back in 1956. He was a pastor there for a little over 50 years before he passed away. And my dad was Jerry Falwell. And so I've been coming, Angie, as you talked about, to NRB. I've been coming from back in the mid-'80s, like 83, 84. So I've been coming, like 33, 34 years I've been coming to this thing. Most of the time that I came, I was just following along and tagging and tailing Dad walking through the halls and those kinds of things. So, our family has been a part of this family for many, many years. And have had the opportunity to get to know a lot of people. In fact, I walked out a few moments ago before we started. I walked out to run down to the restroom. And I've always been taught that it's two things in life. Whenever you're getting on an airplane, never pass up a perfectly good bathroom. And whenever you're going up on a stage, never pass up a perfectly good bathroom. So I walked down the hall, and as I did, I had the opportunity to run into a lot of people that I've known through the years and got to visit with them. And so this is a special place. And Angie's absolutely right. Man, what an amazing opportunity that we have to get together with people from all over the world. It used to be, as you know, Ron, all over America. Now it's all over the world to get together and to have like heart, like mission, like mind, that our passion is and should be one only thing, and that is this: to reach this world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And is that your passion? That's my passion. That's my desire. And so at Thomas Road Baptist Church, we certainly are continuing to move forward. Liberty University is a part of our ministry there. My dad started Liberty back a number of years ago as well. And so we're still involved in media. We're on television, and we do lots of those kind of course. Now, there's streaming and all these other elements and all these other things, which keeps us all busy. It keeps us all focused on all the different new technologies. And I believe this with all my heart, that every time a new technology comes out, every time something like this comes out, that is, while it might be created by pagans in Silicon Valley, I believe it is something that God gives to the church to use to reach the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. My dad had a phrase, and Joe Hale, you remember my dad saying this many times: saturation evangelism. It's reaching every available person at every available time by using every available means. And that's what we do, and I know that's what you do, and so we honor you and thank you for your passion and your heart. And so back in the late 1980s, I met Shari when she was traveling with Truth, in fact. I saw them out on the road one time at a concert, and I went back, and I actually was personally responsible for the first time Truth ever came to Thomas Road Baptist Church. Was not because we wanted to be blessed by their music. It was because I wanted to be blessed by her presence. And so I got Dad talked into inviting them to come, and they did. And of course, the rest is history. We met, and we've been married for almost 25 years this fall, September the 5th. And we have 4 children. We have a 20-year-old son who is getting ready to turn 21 next week, 20-year-old son. And we have a 19-year-old daughter. Both of them are studying at Liberty University, one in pastoral ministry, one in elementary education. And then we also have 2 younger children, 16 years old, that are both the twins, boy-girl twins, that are at junior and high school there at our school, our Christian school there as part of our church. And so that's our family, and that's who we are. Shari's from California. I'm from Lynchburg. I married her because the in-laws are far, far away. We're not recording this, are we?
Yes,
I'm just kidding.
Are.
Okay. But anyway, so I do want to take some time this morning and just to kind of share with you, I've been asked specifically to talk about, as Angie shared in the introduction, how we can make sure that we're faithful in doing what God has called us to do without losing everything. Now, in the scriptures, there's a passage where Jesus said, what would it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? We know that passage. But there's a great pastor many, many years ago that paraphrased that verse in a different way. And he said, what would it profit a pastor if he gains the whole world and loses his own children? And I think all of us in this room have many times heard the stories, tragic stories, of ministry leaders whose families have fallen apart. We've all read about it, whether in the news, because we've seen certainly those, the big names, the big stories, the big ministry leaders whose families have crashed and burned because of all the different things that maybe we'll spend some time talking about today. But far more significant and far more important in my mind are the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of stories that we never read about in the newspaper, that we never saw in the news, that were never talked about, never tweeted about, the subject of scuttlebutt rumors around the NRB floor, families of pastors of churches that were faithful in ministry and faithful in doing all of the things, and because they were in small ministries, because they didn't have large staffs, that they did everything. And they took that burden upon their back, upon their shoulders, that they had to do it all. And they had to make sure that they were there every moment. They had to minister over and over and over again. And while they were doing that, they were losing the greatest gift that God, outside of salvation, that God could ever give them, and that is their family. That is something that we've got to turn around. We've got to change it. When you hear those stories, what we recognize is just quite honestly this. It's people who are far more interested and far more passionate, far more committed into what God wanted them to do rather than who God wanted them to be. And that's the story we've heard so many times. They feel like their calling of God is more important than the presence of God. And so that's what we've got to turn around. That's something that I'm, very specific about, and I talk about it a lot. I share it with our staff. I share it with our church family at home. When I became the senior pastor, one of the first statements out of my mouth as I stood on the stage as their senior pastor for the first time was this, is that if this job as your pastor, this responsibility that I take on today, if this is ever something that ends up taking the place of, or it begins to infringe upon, or begins to damage my relationship with my family, I want to make the commitment to you as my church, congregation. I want to make the commitment to you today. I will quit instantly and walk away from this church and never regret it for a minute, because that's how important the family has to be. That is how important that we must see the God-given priorities. Shari, Shari, I'm a preacher, and so I do a lot of talking, a lot, and I a lot of times we'll talk for long periods of time, and sometimes, and I know this might shock you, but as a pastor, sometimes I talk a lot without ever having prepared to talk, because we pastors are good at that. Now, Shari is different. Now, Shari actually spends time planning and doing research, and she shared with me some things that she's actually spent some time putting together, specifically talking about this area. And so I want her to take a few minutes and just share with you some statistics. Now, statistics, most people get bored by statistics, but recognize this, that every statistic, every number represents a person. It represents a family. It represents a marriage. It represents children that are impacted not just in one day, but impacted forever as a result of failed and broken marriages. And so, Shari, why don't you take a minute, just kind of share some of those things that you have looked up and found.
These are a few marriage statistics. 53% of very happy couples agree with the statement, quote, God is at the center of our marriage. And there's a couple other ones that really surprised me too. Those that are considered to be nominal Christians, those who tend to call themselves Christians but do not particularly engage in the faith, are surprisingly 20% more likely than the general population to get a divorce. And this is the one that I told him, I'm like, okay, we got to make sure that we do better. Many couples spend an average of only 4 minutes a day engaging in meaningful conversation with their spouse. It's like, okay, we've got to do better than 4 minutes. I mean, I know that we do.
Well, what's the most important word in that statement? In that last statement, what's the most important word that they spend?
Meaningful.
Meaningful. Because a lot of people would hear that statistic and they think, well, come on, we talk more than 4 minutes, right? Come on, that's a no-brainer. The difference there, the impact there, the important thing is the word meaningful, because meaningful goes far beyond about what we're going to have for dinner. It goes far beyond about, hey, you burned the pot roast or whatever that might be. Meaningful means conversations that strengthen, that grow, that develop, that deepen relationships. So,
the final one is always strive to give your spouse the very best of yourself, not what's left over after you've given your best to everyone else. And I think a lot of times when there's people in Media, well, just him talking right now, the whole, I don't know what the exact number is, but how many words men use per day versus how many words a woman uses. Well, I know when he's at work, he uses up all of his words, and sometimes when he comes home, he just shuts down. And, I get that, but I know sometimes you just have to go that extra mile because we need that, and the kids need to see us communicating with each other. And, even going back into the early days of our marriage, we would try to do the whole date night thing. And it ended up being when we actually did get a babysitter and do the date night, all we did was talk about the children the whole time we were together. So now it's just like, let's just bring the kids with us every time. So I think it's awesome. Jonathan always wants to have the kids. It kills us to be in Orlando without the children, and they're mad at us for not being here with us right now. But he had a great teacher in his dad, and I love that legacy has passed down. I was just thinking last night how back in the day when my father-in-law was still alive, and, here's a man who speaks to presidents and heads of state and, people who have just, high regard and respect. And any time I would call him on his cell phone, if he was in a conference, he would answer my phone call. And I'm his daughter-in-law. He did that with every single member of his family. We were always more important than what was going on right then. Now, I know that there have been times where you haven't been able to answer the phone because he was in the middle of a funeral, and we'll let him pass on that one.
It just rang just a second ago. But I knew it wasn't you, so I wasn't worried about it.
See, he's scoring some points right now.
There's no question. My dad gave a great example in me and poured that into me. And again, Joe and Ann Hale, who are seated here on the third row, they were back in our church back in the late 70s. And so they know my dad, back in the day. They had the opportunity to serve for many years as missionaries in Korea. And regardless of what he was doing, and Shari was right, I mean, he would be traveling around all over the world. He'd be speaking in major conventions like NRB, spoke here every year. He had, all these things in Washington and meeting with, again, presidents, all these kinds. But he always made sure that he was there every single time that we needed him. Every time that I, had a game, he was there sitting on the sidelines. It didn't matter what he had going on. He'd get up and walk out to be there. Now, I realized, when I was a senior in high school, I played baseball, and he was there at every single game. Now, I know this. I stunk at baseball. I mean, I was horrific at baseball. And I know that as he sat there on the sidelines watching me play baseball, he probably inside was probably laughing because he actually was drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals back when he got out of college. I mean, he was a great baseball player, and here his son just making a miserable mockery of everything that my dad had been in regards to sports. I know my dad was probably inside laughing at me, but you know what? He sat there and he came to every single game and watched me stink up the baseball field. Why? The lesson he gave to me was this, is that I was more important to him than anything else. I want you to ask yourself the question. Of those of you who have families, I see some younger people in here. I see some not so younger people. I didn't point at you. Just not so young people in here. Does your family believe that they are more important to you than anything else going on in your life? Do they believe that? Now, understand this. Telling them that doesn't do anything. Telling them that they're more important than anything else. That really, those are great words, and they're nice for the moment, but only showing them does it really matter. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, there's a passage that says that someone who doesn't provide for and take care of his own household, in fact, it says for those who don't provide for their own, especially those that are in their own household, that they're worse than an unbeliever. Some passages use, or some versions say worse than an infidel. I mean, that literally, if we're not taking care of those that God has placed into our own homes, that we are worse than an infidel, an unbeliever. And we know what God through his word tells us about unbelievers. I mean, we understand that. We get that picture. And so that's the message that we have to kind of carry on. That's what we've got to take with us. That's what we've got to make sure that we apply into our lives. And we know that families are in trouble. We know the divorce statistics. I mean, they're all over the place. You hear some people say that the divorce statistics in Christian homes is no different than it is in the world, at 50% and 50%. Now, I believe those statistics are somewhat skewed because I think when they do those numbers, they're including different levels of people who've been divorced multiple times and all those kinds of things. But regardless, if it's 35%, if it's 40%, regardless of what the numbers are, the fact that in Christian homes that there's not much difference between a Christian home and the world's home with regards to divorce and the breakdown of the family. That is a tragedy. Because when we show up in our churches, when you involved in media, when you are putting out there the programming, the content that you want to share with the people that happen to listen or watch the programming that you put out, our desire, our passion is to build strong homes and strong families. When I get up on Sundays and I preach to thousands of people at Thomas Road Baptist Church, my hope and my prayer is that that room would be filled with families that are strong and that are honoring God and that are walking with God and serving God. And the kids are growing up to love God and to walk with God and to serve God. And yet we see the statistics and we see that, what the proof is, it really doesn't bear out what we believe is happening. And so I think it's something that we definitely have to work on. And so what's the answer? What is it about this situation that we face, the breakdown of the family? What is it that we've got to do? And I think it's this, as we as ministry leaders, that we have to be very diligent about conveying the importance of priorities in our families and in our churches, in our ministries. We have to make sure that we're, very clearly enumerating to our people what priorities really are. That our relationship with God is number one. It's absolute. It's important. We have to study God's word. We have to talk to God. We have to get to know him better today than we got to know him yesterday. I was in a counseling session 2 days ago with a young man who was basically, he came in to talk to me because he said, man, I want to know, how can I be sure that God loves me? And how can I be sure that I'm a Christian? And, how can I be sure that, that all these promises that I hear you talk about on this, how can I be sure that those promises are something I can grab a hold of? And so we talked through some things, and we kind of walking through this journey, and it got to a place where I said, let me ask you a question. Tell me, if you would, about your personal Bible study and your prayer time. Tell me what that looks like. Well, it's kind of lacking right now. I'm just, because I'm struggling with all this stuff, it's just kind of lacking. I said, okay, stop. Let me ask you a question. Are you dating someone? And he said, oh, yeah, I date this girl. Her name's April. We've been dating for 2 years. I'm probably going to get married before too long. She's wonderful. I said, oh, great. I said, let me ask you a question. You met her, about 3 years ago? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. So you saw her and you thought, man, I want to ask her out, right? I want to, build a relationship with this girl, right? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. So tell me, if you would have walked up to her 3 years ago and said, hey, April, I want to take you to dinner. I want to take you to dinner and I want to, have a date with you and go out and get to know you. Can we do that? And she said, yes. I mean, obviously you're thrilled because she agreed to go out with you. So then you go out, and then what you do on that date is you sit there and you don't talk to her the entire time. And then the next day, you see her and you walk over and maybe you sit with her in a service or you sit with her in an event and you never talk with her. In fact, you never talk with her again for the next 3 years. And you date this girl for 2.5 years and you're close to marriage and yet you never talk to her. Tell me, how's that relationship going to work? And he said, oh man, she'd have thrown me out long ago. There's no question. There's no way we'd have, be getting close to marriage. I said, it's the exact same thing with your relationship with God. There are so many Christians today who come to the place where they say, man, I believe that Jesus died on the cross for me. I believe that he rose again. I believe, according to Romans 10, that he is God's son. I believe that he did all that for me. I believe John 14, he's the only way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father except through him. I believe that. God save me, forgive me of my sins. Man, I'm a Christian. And then immediately they spend the rest of the days never talking with God, never hearing from God, never studying God's word. And they're wondering why they struggle in their faith. It's because we're not actually spending time with the one who has saved us. It's the same thing. That relationship has got to be priority. Secondly, our relationship with our families. Our relationship with our family has to be absolute, right behind our relationship with God. And as ministry leaders, we know this. It's difficult. Now, I don't know how many here are pastors or involved in ministry with regards to local churches, but, from a local church perspective, I do know this. I know that, every day, I mentioned it just a moment ago, every day I'm dealing with the struggles within our church. I hear about the struggles within our church, and many times those struggles are brought to me to help to kind of fix them. They come to me and they think that, let's go sit down with the pastor and he's going to fix all of our problems. Of course, we all know that's not going to happen. That's impossible. It can't be done. But yet that's what they believe. And so every day, all day long, we have all this stuff that's dumped on us, right? And we hear all this stuff and we take the burden upon our back that we've got to fix this. We've got to make sure we solve this. We've got to help them through this situation. We've got to walk them through this. And man, we take that on ourselves over and over and over again. And pastors do that. And they're doing it for God. They're doing it to serve God, to walk with God. And all all along the way, you know what they're ended up doing? Is through that, because they're so focused on making sure they're trying to help the people in their churches with the problems that they're facing, they're creating monumental problems at home because they've forgotten that your responsibility first above someone else's problems is making sure that your home is safe, 1 Timothy chapter 5. And that's something we've got to be diligent about. It's something we've got to work at. Now, of course, me, I'm coming from a perspective of the pastor. I'm the guy that, has to deal with those kinds of things. I'm the one that has to, walk through those counseling sessions in those times with other families. And, of course, Shari, as the pastor's wife, she's the one that's on the flip side of that. Now, one thing I think I've been pretty good at over these 25 years, but specifically the last 10 years of marriage, is I don't bring that stuff home. I rarely do I come home and share with her all the problems and all the families and the issues and all the challenges. And I believe that's important. Is it? I mean, is that a good thing?
It's a wonderful thing.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like you can read your husbands and when they're having an off day, he just kind of gets quiet, but he does not bring it up with the children if he's had a tough day. And I'm going back even to your dad again, when he was going through all the financial issues, how the burden on him was so huge and all of these people were relying on him to see them through. But yet when he would be with the family, he would put on the smile and he would laugh and he knew God had it, and I know Jonathan knows that when he comes home that God has got those people covered, and I know that he has filled himself up daily in the Word. And I think that when you do have the time in the Word, you have the discernment of how you need to be and how you need to react. And I think God just covers you in his Holy Spirit, and he gives you that. He knows if he feels it, he senses it right away. It's like, okay, you know what, I can't bring this at home, and so let's go have fun with the kids. And I think you've been awesome with that.
Well, that's important. It's important because priorities don't happen by chance. Having the right priorities in life, it doesn't happen by accident. It happens when we are very deliberate about it, diligent about it. What really matters in life is who really matters in life. In what we go through, what really matters is the people, the individuals. And of course, we've already talked about God's first. Behind that, our families are second. And everybody else and everything else in ministry, everything else comes after those elements. It comes after those specific situations. And that's what our focus has to be. One thing that I have tried to do through the years, and of course, as the kids get older, it's a little bit more difficult. With regards to making sure that I'm strengthening and I'm focusing on the family as well. And that's not James Dobson focusing on the family. I mean, focusing on my family along with this journey of ministry is I've always tried to figure out how we can do ministry together. When I go on missions trips, I take my kids with me. When we're involved in different aspects of ministry, I try to include them, involve them. Now, they're older. It's a little bit more challenging now because it really stinks. When kids get up in like their upper teens, they actually have lives. It's really annoying. I don't know how many of you have teenagers or, it's like they actually have things that they want to do that don't include you, and I'm against it completely. I've told my kids that when they get married, they're staying at home. I'll build a wing out of each house, out of the house, off the sides of our house, all stay home. And they're not for that. It's really annoying. It's obnoxious that they actually want lives of their own. But I've tried to include them in ministry. And so when we're doing things together, when we're serving God together, walking with God together, it also helps them to see the value of what you do. Now, the reason I say that is because oftentimes when we're involved in ministry and we separate our family from our ministry, when we separate it to the point of, this is what I do over here, and then there's a wall, and this is what I do with my family, the family is sitting there, and I'm telling you, it is without fail, there will be resentment between both. There'll be resentment from the family over the fact that I'm having to spend time over here. When I get a call at 10 o'clock at night and I've got to go to the hospital and hang out at the hospital with a family who's going through a tragedy and my children want me at home, which has happened many, many times in my life. And when I have to, go on vacation and because of a tragedy at home, a death or situation where I actually have to, make my way back. We went a couple of years ago. My daughter, when she graduated from high school, what she wanted for her high school graduation is to go to Europe. And so we've been planning for it and saving up for it to go to Europe. And so we took the whole family to Europe. And there was one of our pastors in our church, one of our associate pastors who had been with my dad the day he got saved, Jim Moon. Joe Hill, Jim. He'd been very sick with cancer. And I went by to see him a few days before we left. And, and he asked me in that conversation, we sat together and we talked for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And he said, listen, when I die, I want you to do my funeral. And I knew, man, this is tough. I'm going to go to Europe. And so we went to Europe and we landed at the Rome airport. And when we landed at the Rome airport, Jason Schoenfelder, who's sitting somewhere out here who works with us, Jason texted me the minute we landed and said, Jim just passed away. We just landed in Rome. I had to buy an airline ticket and turn right back around and fly back to Lynchburg. Now, I'm telling you this story because you're sitting there saying, I can't believe he left his family in Rome, and I can't believe, and they understand that there are things that I just have to do with regards to ministry that is going to be somewhat difficult. It's going to be challenging schedule-wise. There's going to be conflict. They understand that because all the rest of the time, I've made sure to include them and help them understand why those things are important. As a pastor, a lot of pastors take off 1 day a week, right? You've heard the story. Pastors will work, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they might take off Thursday and Friday. They might take off Friday, and they get out of the office and they take a day off. I've never taken a day off during the week. Never done it. I've never done it on purpose. You know why? Because as my kids were in school, what I would do is I would go in with them. I would drive them to school. And then I would drop them off at school, and I'd go to my office. I'd be at work all day. And then at 3 o'clock every afternoon, I walk out of my office, and I went and picked them up from school, and I took them home. So that every time they were out of school, I was out of school. Now, the only way I can do that, the only way that I can make that work with work hours and making sure that I'm not, shirking my responsibility as a pastor is I did not take a day off during the week so that, between 8 and 3 o'clock, I can go out and play golf every day. So I could be out on the golf course or hanging out with friends. I did that deliberately because I wanted my kids to know that they were more important to me than going and playing golf once a week on a day off. Those kinds of things. So when those things happen like it did in Italy, when I had to turn around and fly right back home, they understand those things because 99% of the time what they've seen in me is someone who will always make sure that I'm there, that I'm putting them first, that I'm making that responsibility as a dad and as a husband is more important than being a pastor. And so we've got to make sure that we prove that. That can only happen when we put God first. It can only happen when we make sure that we recognize that what really matters is who really matters. If God is not first in your relationship with your family, and God is not first in your life, I promise you this, you will blow it as a husband, as a mom, as a father, as a wife. You'll blow it. I'm just telling you, it's guaranteed. You will blow it. It will mess up. You will crash and burn. So let's just talk about it for a few minutes if we could. And I'm going to have Shari I told her this morning, I said, okay, today, because we don't do a lot of this together, I said, today, when we walk on that stage, this will be the only time in life where I talk far more than you do. It's the only time. And so she said, I understand that. I get that. So, but I do want her to jump in here in a minute. But when we talk about how do we make sure we do this, what are some of the things that we can put into our lives and into our aspects of leaders with regards to our family? How can we make sure we do that? And the first thing we got to do is we got to avoid the obvious, okay? And I'm going to talk about some things here that I believe, and I've seen with my own eyes where people have blown it. And the first one is this. We got to avoid we have to avoid legalism. There are way too many ministry leaders that because of who they are, because they're worried about their status as a pastor or as a Christian leader, as a ministry leader, because they're focused on making sure that they're doing the right thing and that people see them doing the right thing, that they institute and implement a legalistic atmosphere at home. And that is why so often you've all heard the proverbial, the PK, the pastor's kid, we see what happens there. That happens when that pastor has implemented largely. I know sometimes there's exceptions to this rule, but largely it's because at home there's been a legalistic atmosphere in the home. My dad, and again, I know some of you in the room that are a little more mature than others. I know you know my dad. You know my dad. You know who he was. You know what he did. You know that even today, 10 years after his death, you know that even today, the media still talks about my dad as being this, a lot of times this awful guy. And this, he was such a conservative and he was, anti this and anti that. And he actually, he did not like abortion. Can you believe that? And he was against gay marriage. And they look at him as just kind of this legalistic guy. My dad, while he was, one of the great leaders in our nation and one of the foremost speakers into the social issues of the day, and when they talk about the religious right, my dad was, he was kind of the father of the religious right. And so they still talk about it today. And they look at him and think he's this awful legalistic guy. I can tell you as his son, he could not have been farther from what the world thinks he was. My dad loved to have fun. My dad loved to goof off. He was not legalistic in any way, shape, or form. He never treated us at home with legalism. There were many times that, that he would laugh at us because it was things that we were doing. There were many times, I remember this, getting in my car, after I got a car when I was a teenager. He would get in my car and I'd start the engine and the music would start. And many times I saw my dad do this, There were times I've gone to concerts with Dad, I think maybe even that First Truth concert, where he actually had some some earplugs that he would stick down in his ears, and he would sit there with a smile on his face as if he was enjoying that concert.
DC Talk.
DC Talk when they were there, because they were friends of mine, and back in the days when they got started. And so there were lots of things that he put up with, and he put a smile on his face, and I knew he hated it. But legalism was far from what he. I mean, from your perspective, as a daughter-in-law, and seeing that, I mean, what did that mean to you with regards to not the typical, what the world thought of my dad, what the press thought of my dad, of what he really was?
Well, I came from a different denomination, and I wondered how a Baptist preacher would accept someone from a different denomination. But he accepted me open arms and called me his daughter. I mean, I loved it. But I never, ever since the legalism, he would cross over and talk to anybody that would invite him to their churches, different denominations and different scenarios, friends with bishops and, priests and rabbis. I mean, he would reach out to everyone. He loved everyone, even to the point where you've shared many times when he even witnessed to Larry Flint. And, someone who was his, nemesis, and as far as going to court and all of the stuff that happened years ago. But he kept that door open to have conversations with Larry Flint and to see that and to see pictures of that, how he didn't hold a grudge, he didn't judge. He just wanted to have the opportunity to share the love of Jesus. And for someone as brilliant as he was, I just love the way that he just never shunned anyone, even homosexuals. I mean, I had a friend who I know that is gay, and he's like, I can't understand why you would, have pictures posted of the two of you together. And I'm like, if he met you, he would absolutely love you. He would not judge you. And it's just like people just have these preconceived notions, like you said, of how he was. But he was one of the most loving, accepting people. He was the closest thing to Jesus I think I've ever met on this earth.
And why it's important that legalism never plays a part in our families and in our relationships at home is that when at home people see legalism in us, here's what they see. They see hypocrisy. They see a false front. They see someone who is bringing preferences in and replacing principle with preference. And there's a difference between principle and preference. This is God's word. Everything that is found in this book is God's word. It is infallible. It is inspired. It's inerrant. Comes directly from the heart of God, given to the heart of man. I believe every word in here. I don't think there's a mistake anywhere in this book. And anything that this book tells me that I, as a Christian leader, should do, I will do. But there are many things that we as Christian leaders, oftentimes, because of preference or because of tradition, we bring it along and we put it and equate it with principle. And when we do that, let me tell you what we're teaching our kids. We're teaching our kids. We're teaching our families. We're teaching our spouses, to be honest with you. We're teaching them that however we feel and whatever we think and whatever other people have told us, that's just as important as God's word. And you know what the scriptures say? Go back to the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt have no other what before me, right? When we allow legalism to come in, we are actually bringing our preferences in, and we're actually making idols out of that. So we got to make sure legalism is gone. Now, that does not mean that we get up and preach on a Sunday morning and we, involved in Christian ministry, whatever that might be, and then we go home and do whatever we want to do. It doesn't mean we go home and have a 50 Shades of Grey movie marathon at our homes. That doesn't mean any of that. It means we do apply God's word, but we don't apply our preferences as God's word. So we got to get rid of the legalism. The second thing we got to do is we got to make sure that we eliminate in our lives as Christian leaders the pressure to follow or to be like someone else. Now listen, let me just tell you something. Every single person in this room, every single person in this conference, every pastor that I've ever met, we all struggle with trying to be like the other guy. There's so many of us as pastors who, man, if I could just do this, if I could just be like Andy Stanley, if I could just write this book, if I could just speak on that stage. I met with a guy the other day, who came into me, and he said, listen, man, I want to get your advice because I really feel like God's calling me to ministry. I'm really feeling like God wants me to speak. And I was at Passion a few weeks ago down in Atlanta. Man, I was sitting there and I was watching that. And I was hearing these guys speak on the stage. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know what? I want to do that. You know, what do I need to do? I really feel like God wants me to do like so I can speak to thousands. And I told him this. I said, if your heart and your passion is that you want to get to the place where you speak to thousands, and that's your focus, and that's what you really, care about, then you might as well give up now and quit. Because if you're not willing to speak to the tens, God will never allow you to speak to the thousands. If God can't trust us with the small things, I can guarantee you God will never put you in the big places. And so we've got to make sure we get rid of that pressure to follow, pressure to be like other people. Because, again, our families will see that. And again, my 4 kids, there have been times in their growing up days where I've had some of my kids, have asked the question, as me as a pastor, a large church, and they would say, hey, do you get to do X, or do you get to do something like this other pastor does? We hear a story or we go to a thing and they see, they've asked a question. And, in fact, Louis Giglio, who leads Passion, my kids love Louis Giglio. I think they love him more than they do me. They love Louis Giglio. And they say, Dad, why doesn't he ever, all this stuff? And I've always conveyed to them, listen, God's called me to be a local church pastor in Lynchburg, Virginia. That's what God's called me to do. And that's my passion and that's my heart. And to be honest with you, yes, I want to reach the world. I want to change the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And yes, we do radio. And yes, we do TV. And yes, we do streaming and all those kinds. Absolutely. We want to carry the gospel to the ends of the world. Matthew 28, Mark 16, Acts chapter 1. Go into all the world, preach the gospel. Go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the uttermost. Yes, we want to do all of that stuff. But God has placed me in little Lynchburg, Virginia, to minister to the people of Lynchburg. And if all that I ever get to do is to minister to and to bless and to speak to the people of my community, let me say, I will have been successful in ministry because that's where God put me. So wherever God's put you, be thrilled about that. Be excited about that. Be passionate about that. And whether it's in a large ministry or a small ministry, whether it's, have the opportunity to speak to thousands or whether it's the opportunity to speak to tens, if you are where God wants you to be, it's the only place that you cannot fail. We can all fail in life. You can fail in business. You can fail in school. Trust me, I've done it. I'm good at it. You can do all that kind of stuff. But when you find God's will for your life and you're perfectly in God's will, guess what? That's the only place you cannot fail. Make sure that your kids know that before they ever walk out of your house. That they don't need to worry about or to seek the fame and the glory and the lights. What they need to seek is God's will, because that's the place where they will find ultimate joy and contentment. And so make sure that we get rid of the pressure to follow. The next thing we got to do is we've got to make sure we never try to influence our kids to be what we want them to be. And that's tough, isn't it? Because we all want our kids to do certain things and to be certain ways. My dad, as you know, I already mentioned it to you a few moments ago, he was big into sports. He loved sports. I'm telling you, he would come home from work in the afternoon. He would come home, and man, if there was a game on that night, he was going to watch that game. It didn't matter who was playing. He was a big Dallas Cowboys fan and a New York Yankees fan, and I'm telling you, he was brutal. He watched it all the time. Loved that stuff, And I know that when he had 2 boys, he had 2 boys and a girl, my brother and my sister and me. I know this: when he had 2 boys, he was excited because he was going to raise some sportsmen. I'm telling you, we stink. My brother played basketball in school. He was awful. Don't tell him I told you. He was awful. I played baseball. I was horrible. I know it had to have, just break my dad's heart that he wasn't able to raise these huge, great sports stars. I also know that my dad never once tried to force me to do anything or to be anything with regards to sports or ministry. And as a 50-year-old now, I can tell you that meant the world to me. Because what it taught me was this, is that my dad was more interested in me being what God wanted me to be than being what he wanted me to be. Isn't that a great lesson? And that's so important. And it's something that we've got to make sure we do. Because again, as ministry leaders, oftentimes, man, we want to craft it. And we want to shape it. We want to, make sure that we try to figure out how to get our kids to do exactly what they should do so they can be like what we want them to be. And then we wonder why our kids rebel. And we wonder why our kids run. We wonder why our kids go off in different directions and don't become what we want to become, and maybe become what we don't ever want them to become. It's because we've tried to force them into being something that God never intended them to be. I've got 4 kids, and I've never once tried to push them into anything. My son, Jonathan, is a pastoral leadership major, the business minor. I'm excited about that. And I don't know what that means for the future. I don't know what he's going to do in the future. I don't know what that is going to lead into. But it excites me because it's pastoral leadership. He actually chose all this stuff. I never once encouraged him to do that. Never once did I tell him to do that. My dad never once tried to pressure me into ministry. Oftentimes, and again, it's not a hard thing to kind of put two and two together. A lot of people think, well, there must have been something that was set up that, Jerry Falwell had it all set up so that when he was gone, that Jonathan was going to take over the church and Jerry was going to take over, the university. And there's all this kind of this clandestine operation and all written in stone in this paper. Never once did my dad talk to me about what was going to happen once he was gone. In fact, when my dad died, that first Sunday after he died, I was serving on the staff. I was in the administration area of the church and leading in the business side of the church. And so that Sunday after Dad died, I did get up and I spoke that day, and I encouraged our people, and thousands of people gathered there. And of course, all of our hearts were broken. He'd been our pastor for 50 years. It was a tragic thing. But never once was it automatic. In fact, I had people come up and say, well, you've got to be our pastor now. I said, no, that's not up to me. That's not my decision. That wasn't Dad's decision. This isn't Dad's church. It's not my church. It's God's church. We want God's man. We don't want a good man. We don't want a good leader. We don't want a son leader. We want God's leader. Now, obviously, God led and through the next couple of months, that God did put me in that position, but not Dad. So don't ever influence your family members to become what you want them to become. Because what you will be doing is that you will be guaranteeing their failure. Now, how many of you have kids here? Just raise your hand if you would. Just let me get. Okay, how many of you, put your hands down. I'm going to ask you to do a poll. How many of you want to play a part in your children's failure? Just raise your hand. Oh, nobody raised their hand. Nobody did. None of us do, right? None of us want to make sure that we're part of seeing our kids fail. If you push your kids to be something, to go into ministry, go into business, something that you want them to do. If you push that, let me tell you what you'll do. You will guarantee their failure. So make sure we don't do that. Stay away from the temptation to make sure that your kids are doing exactly what it is that you want them to do. I don't know what my kids are going to do. I have no idea what my kids are going to end up doing. My son, my daughter's elementary education, she's probably going to end up teaching school. I never once encouraged her to do that, never once pushed her to do that. But she loves it. She's passionate about it. It's something that she's, loves doing. That's awesome. And I can't wait to see what God does with her. My two younger kids, Nicholas and Natalie, 16 in high school. I have no idea what they're. My job now is just to keep them out of jail till they get there. and so just be their dad, be their mom. Be the person that can influence them to be what God wants them to be, not what you want them to be. And of course, the one thing we have to make sure we do is we always live out an example. Make sure. One of the coolest things, I know I'm talking a lot, and jump in here anytime. I'm sorry.
I think that you're supposed to close in a prayer time too.
I will. So one of the coolest things that I think I picture that I've ever seen was a picture that my daughter took one time of me. Actually, I wasn't in the picture, but she took a picture of a setting that was of me. Because we were on vacation one day, and we were at the beach, and I had gotten up early because, again, my kids are teenagers, so, they sleep till like 3 in the afternoon usually. And so I'd gotten up early, and I'd gone into the kitchen there of the little condo that we had rented. And I love photography. Back in the 80s, I shot for Time Magazine and Newsweek and stuff. And so it's something I've always really been passionate about, love doing. I still do it. And so I was sitting out there, and I had my camera on the table there in the kitchen. I had my camera there, and I had a big 32-ounce Diet Coke from McDonald's. That's another thing. I get a lot of Diet Coke from McDonald's, and I had that sitting there. And so I had my camera, and I had my Diet Coke, and I had my Bible there. And so she took a picture and she posted it on Instagram. I didn't know it till much later. But she said, here's a picture of my dad in one picture. And it was my Bible and my camera and my Diet Coke. But what was really cool is that what my daughter saw of me was somebody who had interest outside of ministry, but also she saw as me somebody who had an interest in the Bible. What a legacy that we can leave to our kids. Make sure that we're showing our kids by example that we're not, that what we do is not what's important. It's who we are in our relationship with Christ that matters. Chuck Swindoll told me one time, he said these words, God's man always dies, but God's work never does. So what that means for us is this. All of us, absent a rapture, all of us are going to die. All of us are going to come to a place where our life ends. And when our life ends, the work that we're involved in, the ministry that we serve in, it's going to keep on going. It's going to keep on rolling, because if it's God's work, it's going to keep on going. But when you die, you're going to end. And so if your work is going to continue, your ministry is going to keep on rolling, regardless of whether you're here or not, then don't you think what our focus ought to be and what our passion ought to be is certainly to make sure we're doing a diligent work of being in ministry. But don't you think also that our passion ought to be this, is to make sure that things that do matter with us, our families, that we spend our time to make sure that when we die, that our families will keep going as well. That's what our heart has to be. That's what we have to focus on. Again, what would it profit the whole world if a man gained the entire world? A ministry leader gained the entire world. What if he reached the entire world but lost his own family? What a tragedy that would be. Shari, why don't you, if we could, just take a minute, and why don't you, if you would, just lead a prayer. I know we got a lot of people here that are from different aspects of ministry and serving at different places. Missionaries and ministry leaders and pastors and media people and all the, why don't you just take a minute and just pray for God's protection and God's provision over every single one of us as regards, not to our ministries, but as to who we are as individuals and our families, that God would protect us and help us to be who God wants us to be.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this great opportunity to hear from your word and to hear the words that Jonathan has spoken to all of us today. God, I know all of your answers for life are in your word, and I pray, Lord, that we will all just diligently seek you in your word every day, because I know that's where we find balance, that's where we find the joy, that's where we find the peace. And when we're feeling the burden, we know your yoke is easy, your burden is light, Father. And I pray, God, that we will all just turn to you and let you take the burdens that we're feeling, Father, when we're feeling overwhelmed by all of our duties and our responsibilities and our families. God, I pray, Lord, that you will give us Holy Spirit discernment on every decision we make. Father, I thank you for all the individuals that are here and who are serving you in some way, Father. I pray, God, that you will just be with them, protect them, Father, protect their families. God, I pray that you will just give them the comfort of your Holy Spirit, that they're on the right track, and that the more we seek you, the more we'll find you, Father, like your word has promised. God, I thank you for the way you are using everyone and their talents in this room right now, Father. And I pray, God, that no matter what we do, you will be glorified in such a way, and you will be the one that we will point to and said, it all happened because of the Lord. And God, I just thank you for how you're going to open doors, open opportunities, build relationships, Father. I just thank you for the way that you have blessed us. You have made us valuable in your sight, Father, and that's because of what your Son did for us on the cross. And I pray, God, that we will pour into others the value that you've poured into us, and that we will all just come through our lives, Father, as winners and as victors. And I just thank you for everything that you've done and every opportunity you've given us. We give you all the glory for this time together. In your name I pray. Amen.